Hi there and welcome to my channel. My name is Christopher Blackwell and today we're going to be learning about drilling and completion basics. So, drilling and completion basics. First we need a rig to be able to drill, and thereafter we'll be completing. You'll learn more about that soon. So this is a rig, and basically you got some pipe that you run into the hole or down to the bottom of the seabed, and then you turn, rotate, and essentially what you're doing is using something that's really solid called a bit at the bottom of that to be able to cut up the ground, and then it brings the ground and the solids back to surface, and you're creating a hole all the way down to total depth, TD, which is an abbreviation for total depth. And once you get to total depth, at that point you can run your completion, and your completion helps facilitate getting oil, getting gas, or getting water out of the hole. So now we have the actual design, the schematic of how we intend to do so. So here you see we've got a conductor pipe, which is the first section. So you drill big large 30-inch, 28-inch hole all the way down maybe a couple of 100 meters or feet, and you run steel, circular piece of steel with a hole in it, down to the bottom of where you've just drilled, a couple of 100 meters as I say. And that's your conductor. That supports your foundation. So once you've supported your foundation, you know that it's not going to collapse on you. You can go to the next section, and the next section you see we've got surface casing. Do it again, drill, pull out of hole, run a steel casing down. At that point you're going to be cementing. So if behind each of the casings you put cement behind there to keep it solid, it doesn't move. And then again the next section further down could be 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters. That's the intermediate section, and drill again after that, production casing. And then you've got the point at which you're either open hole, you're perforating, where you're drilling, essentially creating holes in your casing to allow for the oil, the gas or the water to come up and come to surface for your tubing or for your casing. And that's essentially the design or the actual configuration of what a oil and gas well looks downhole. In order to get your solids, or as they say cuttings in the oil and gas industry, out of hole when you're drilling and getting all these solids back to surface, you need some kind of conduit or some kind of mechanism to move that to surface. And we use a fluid, or what we say is we use like drilling mud, and this fluid or drilling mud just mixes up with the solids, brings it back to surface, and at surface you've then got your shakers which help to filter out the solids. So then you can use that fluid again, put it down the hole, down through the middle, and then at that point you're coming back up into the backside, or the annulus as we call it, and you're bringing the solids back to surface. You keep doing that, and that continuous mixing of fluid and cuttings brings it to surface. You see here we've got the drill pipe and BHA, so that's the bottom hole assembly. You see there's a couple of drill bits and the actual assembly. So as I said, it's made up of pieces of pipe that you run in hole, but at the bottom you've got an assembly that is specially designed to have some kind of mechanism to move the actual BHA assembly at certain points along your well path when you're drilling, because they're not always going to be vertically straight down. They'll be directional or even horizontal when you get down to further and deeper depths. So at this point we've got certain pieces of equipment such as non-rotating sleeves. You've got stabilizers, sensor subs, and you've got MWD, which is measure while drilling subs. It tells you where you are in terms of your geographical location relative to the bit, which is the drilling bit. We've got jars, help with jarring in certain instances to make sure that you don't get hung up or stuck. And there's all different sizes for these configuration or this type of design or actual way that your well needs to be drilled, the sizes of the hole and the equipment that you put inside of it. So that was a part of drilling, and then we move over to completions, where what we do is we put in certain pieces of equipment once we've got as nice casings in hole and we've cemented them, everything's hunky-dory, and at that point we want to have a nice conduit in which the oil, the gas or the water comes up through. When you say why water, because 99% of the wells in the world will experience water coming with the oil and gas at the same time, which you don't want. But in an oil and gas producer, you kind of know that you're going to be expecting water. Now if you start off with 1%, 2% to 5% water cut, that's fine, and it's only when you start to experience higher water cuts than that, and then the well starts to become uneconomically bad for you. So you're uneconomical to run the well. So here you see we've got production tubing. So you start with the lower one, the deeper one obviously, it's called the lower completion, and on that you've got screens, and screens are just to mitigate the hole from collapsing and the solids, the finer solids, from getting into the actual well, which can cause damage and cause blockage, etc. You can put screens in on their own, or you can do gravel packing, which is putting certain solids on the outside of these screens to prevent the solids migrating or having the ability to move. Just keeps it solid. And then above that you've got your packer, and it says a screen hanger, your hanger packer, and that's to hang off on the casing. And then below that you've got your lower completion hanged off on your casing via this hanger, which is very important. There's a lot of forces acting upon this packer, so we need to make sure it's suitably designed. And above that it's called your upper completion, and that's where you run in. So you run in with the first one, lower completion, you run in with the second one, and that's your upper completion. Now the upper completion has a lot of different components in it to help facilitate the oil, gas and water coming up into the upper completion. And here we've got obviously the tubing, you've got the downhole safety valve, which is a super critical safety component that if for whatever reason there was some kind of high pressure coming up that you couldn't control at surface, at that point you can close it, or it would close on its own to prevent that. So that's your final barrier, if you will, in the well. You've got your production packer, which again, same as the lower completion packer, there's different forces acting on it, which is critical to make sure that your barriers are in place. Because barriers are really important in the drilling and completion world, where we always need to have at least 2 barriers in the well to prevent any kind of oil, gas, water coming up and causing a blowout. And at that point we've got downhole pressure gauge and the DHPG, which helps to facilitate monitoring the tubing for temperatures and pressures downhole. You want to understand what's actually happening down there, and in some instances you could have certain kinds of artificial lifts, such as ESPs, which is electrical surface pumps, that we use to help facilitate the production of the wells by reducing the head. We'll go into the super details later, but this is just for the basics. So that's pretty much it. You drill each of the sections: conductor, intermission casing, production casing. You cement it, you come down to your depth. You've got a lower completion that you run in to help you stop the solids from coming to surface. You've got the upper completion to help facilitate safety or the actual production by reducing the head, as I mentioned. And once you've got all these in the well, you've got something that works. You've got something that's able to produce and make you money, I guess, the company's money. And at that point you would then say, let's keep this well on for 10, 20 years, keep making the money. And at that point afterwards you've also got to plan for the future event of having a permanent abandonment, which is P&A. So at that point you're pulling out the lower completion, the upper completion that I just mentioned, and you're running in plugs, and then you're cementing on top of those plugs to give you two barriers at which you can then move on away from that well in the future. So that's it, drilling and completion basics. Obviously for each of part of what I've just discussed, we will be discussing in further detail for each of the sections / modules later on in this course. See you in the next one.